With his ghar wapsi to the RJD, leaving the BJP for the second time in 8 years, Nitish Kumar has proved to be the great survivor of Indian politics. But what happens next in Bihar and what is the impact on 2024? I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. Well, this is the big focus this evening. Nitish Kumar and Tejasvi Yadav emerging literally hand in hand after Mr. Kumar resigned. This after sources in the Janata Dal United say that the chief minister was apprehensive that the BJP would do a Maharashtra to him. To quote one JDU leader, the BJP was hell bent on weakening Nitish Kumar and then basically calling him weak. But if Nitish Kumar is the great survivor, does the day actually belong to the RJD's Tejasvi Yadav? Remember, that's the party that has 79 MLAs in the present assembly. Will this now be a rotating ministership? What does this do to the non-BJP opposition politics? And whose day is this really? To decode all of this and more, we're joined by a very special newsmaker live, Pavan Verma. Pavan Verma, of course, is a man of many parts. He's been a diplomat, he is an author, he's been a member of the Rajya Sabha, and he has also, most importantly, been a close associate of Nitish Kumar, has been with the Janata Dal United as well. Mr. Verma, welcome to the program. Let me start by asking you, are you surprised or did you expect this? And I'll tell you why I asked this. Because often it would seem that Nitish Kumar would go right up to the precipice and then step back from taking the jump. Now that the jump has been taken, are you surprised?
I don't think I am so much surprised as the BJP is. Uh, they were almost confident that in a asymmetrical situation where the RJD has far more many MLAs, Nitish Kumar's joining and the RJD's ability or willingness to accept him as chief minister and play more or less second fiddle to him as the head of the government. The BJP was convinced that this is not likely to happen. Secondly, the BJP, I think, had its own instruments of what they believed a workable pressure on Tejasvi Yadav, that at any cost he should not align himself again with Nitish Kumar. So I think the BJP was proceeding as if Nitish Kumar is optionless. Whereas, as you know, Nitish Kumar always has the ability to surprise you. And he
But
did
hang
it.
on, hang on. What are these workable instruments that you think the BJP had with Tejasvi Yadav?
You know, it's no secret, but I am not saying I have concrete evidence for it, that the BJP uses central agencies like the ED, the CBI, the IT, and other investigative agencies, in particular, to target political opponents. And in the case of the RJD, there are cases still pending against the top RJD leadership. So perhaps those were pressure points. What the BJP did not realize is that Nitish Kumar will reach a point where he says enough is enough. And let me tell you why he had reached that point. First of all, he was definitely uncomfortable ever since he joined the BJP in 2017. He did it, but I don't think he was ever comfortable. I have had talks with him even earlier on when he was very much newly into the alliance with the BJP. You see, Nitish Kumar had taken a resolute stand against the BJP led by Narendra Modi in 2013, as you will recall, and courageously fought for his stand of an inclusive, secular, tolerant, plural, multi-religious, multicultural India. Uh, he suffered for it. So when people say he's entirely without principles, it would have been the easiest thing for him at that time as a BJP ally to ride on the wave of success of Narendra Modi. But he took a stand. However, the BJP, I think, is suffering from some misguided hubris. From the very beginning, they made it clear to Nitish Kumar that he is an optional accessory. that he is in a way tokenistically been made the chief minister, whereas the BJP is the party with more MLAs actually in power. Secondly, the BJP was transparently, I'm sorry, there's no other word to use, Machiavellian in its conspiracy to cut Nitish down to size. When in the 2020 elections, they used the Chirag Paswan factor, uh, allowing him to put up candidates only against the JDU to cut its votes. And Chirag, remember, called himself the Hanuman of Narendra Modi. He was not restrained by the BJP in his tactics. So Nitish Ji was reduced to 45 MLAs or thereabouts.
Yeah,
And
43.
he was
Hmm.
fully aware of what was conspiring against him. I think the straw on the camel's back came when he got wind of the fact that the BJP is in fact attempting to break the JD, as they did with the Shiv Sena in Maharashtra. And although probably they put too much hope in an otherwise rootless political leader like RCP Singh, but the ramifications of the conspiracy, I think, got known to Nitish Kumar. And he realized that here is a party which comes to power holding the hands of a regional ally and then proceeds to erode, decimate, reduce uh, that same ally in its aim of getting power on its own. Remember, the BJP has never come to power in Bihar on its own. And it is their feeling that that is their right. It's an important state in the Hindi heartland. So
Yeah.
Nitish Kumar was unhappy on the ideological front with BJP's increasingly emphatic policies of religious polarization for short term vote dividends. He
Let
was
me ask you
unhappy.
this though. Let me ask you this though. As someone who's followed this story, I know there was a time when you were still with the Janata Dal United, and you actually tried quite hard. I think you were part of that meeting, and I think Prashant Kishore, who joined Nitish Kumar's party and then now has left to forge his own path. Both of you, and I reported this story, which is how I remember it. Both of you had a meeting with Nitish Kumar. I think it was in Delhi, and you discussed the possibility of leaving the NDA at that time. Mr. Kumar did not eventually agree. Do you think that he took too long and he depleted and diminished his own brand in the process?
I don't think he diminished it. You have to be, in a sense, make the decision at the right time. There has to be enough reason in your armory to
Hmm.
justify another U turn. And it was perhaps too soon for him to take a final decision so quickly. But I can say candidly to you that it was my view that the BJP will use him and seek to destroy him. And I felt particularly bad about this because when I had resigned from the Foreign Service and joined Nitish Kumar, I saw in him then, I see in him today the potential of being a leader at the national level. And I think that role today is still available to him because the opposition does need some kind of consensus candidate or a focal point to bring itself together. And the need of the hour is opposition unity in spite of past problems. That's the only way you can face up to the BJP. And in Bihar, all parties have come together.
So you
So
you
I
you
think
believe
it's a
you
template.
believe that it's not too late for Nitish Kumar to yet emerge as a kind of galvanizing force for the non-BJP parties. Is that what you're saying?
I think politics is dynamic. I'm not saying that will necessarily happen, but I believe that there are many people in the country, including in the opposition, and if I may say so, in the BJP, who feel that Nitish Kumar, with his administrative experience, personal integrity, and his stature as a leader from the Hindi heart belt, it can be a candidate who could provide a rallying focal point against Narendra Modi.
Let me be a little bit cynical here, just because I've now of the vintage that this moment is something that I've seen many times before. So it gives me a sense of deja vu. I remember Ram Guha once asked, "Who's the Obama of India?" named Nitish Kumar. Nitish Kumar was a great favorite with those who did not, like the BJP. And then they felt very betrayed when he crossed sides. But this is the second time in 8 years that Nitish Kumar has stepped away from the BJP, to the extent that even Tejasvi, who is now his partner in government, used to call him Paltu Chacha. How is Mr. Kumar going to escape the branding of being the Paltu Chacha yet again when you talk of him as a galvanizing opposition force?
वो कहावत है देर आए दुरुस्त आए. तो
बहुत
सो
बहुत देर नहीं हो गई, बहुत देर नहीं हो गई, कुछ ज्यादा ही देर
वो
हो गई.
हो सकता है देर हो गई हो सकता है. Politics is dynamic, Barkha. And today, in a sense, there are very widespread legitimate discontents at the ground against the BJP. But you need a channelizing force. Now, how it happens, when it happens, in what manner it happens, but I think the entire opposition in this country is facing the brunt of selective vendetta politics. The common person is suffering from unprecedented price rise and unemployment. And I think beyond a point, even the ordinary person is now tired of the constant refrain of religious division or hyper nationalism. So I think people are looking for more. So far, the BJP's strength was that the opposition was divided or is divided, and the BJP is an organized party with a popular leader and a very strong cadre. Now, how the mood and sentiment in a country changes is always something very interesting, because there are previous examples of how this happened unexpectedly and there was a change of
Yeah.
political uh, uh,
Yeah.
alignments.
But Pavan, let's look at the numbers, right? You know the numbers, but just to jog the memory of our audience, we're talking about Mr. Kumar at 43 seats in partnership with a party that has 79 seats. And there is one view that says that Mr. Kumar is the great survivor of Indian politics, but the day, if any, belongs to Tejasvi Yadav, whose election this was to take. And there was a one seat difference at that time between the BJP and his party. There's already talk about a rotating chief ministership. Why would indeed Tejasvi support this government without his pound of flesh? So is Nitish Kumar the survivor, or is he the winner today?
Well, I think that uh, the two questions are not linked. In politics, there are many survivors. Those who are adroit enough to see the need for change and take it in time, whether for personal survival or because that is what their instinct tells them. Nitish Kumar, who has never won a majority in Bihar on his own, has remained chief minister for 17 years.
I mean,
So
this is his eighth time taking oath and his fifth time consecutively. It's just astonishing, actually, at one level.
that's true. But I mean, you have to seize the moment. I think there is some degree of ideological compromise, but politics is not playing out in an ideal environment. And leaders today realize that. I mean, the BJP was in alliance. They formed a government in Jammu Srinagar with the PDP. Now the same PDP leaders are in jail. Their partner was the Shiv Sena, the one of their oldest partners. They've succeeded in breaking it. So I mean, you take Lok Jan Shakti Party. I mean, Chirag's party. They used Chirag against Nitish Kumar, and then broke the party, and Chirag's uncle and the rest of the MLAs joined the BJP because recently Mr. Nadda said there is no place for regional or other parties in India, only the BJP will remain. Now, with this kind of approach, I
Hmm.
don't think you are being able to hold India. And Nitish Kumar, for whatever it is, has been in politics now for over 5 decades. And he has realized, perhaps too late, I agree that the BJP of which that he always knew is not the same BJP as Atal Bihari Vajpayee at the helm, or an Arun Jaitley to speak to, or even an LK Advani. Uh, uh, this BJP is aggressive, it's expansionist, it's ruthless, and it resorts to Sam Dam Dand Bhed, every possible upay against a political opponent.
So basically, you're saying Nitish Kumar's tipping point, last straw, though he did give indications, for example, by attending an iftar party at Tejasvi Yadav's house, by calling a all-party meeting on the caste census. There were many hints, but his tipping point, in your estimation, was that he knew that he would be devoured by the BJP in the way that the Shiv Sena was basically, or at least the Thackeray, sort of section of the Shiv Sena was devoured in Maharashtra.
I think so. You see, the BJP cannibalizes its own alliance partners or seeks to reduce them uh, to, as I use the expression, optional accessories. No NDA meeting has taken place for so long. It's a one man party with an absolute ambition of hegemony. India is a diverse country, and I think the BJP's policies of dividing India, of attacking institutions, of uh, using agencies for political vendetta, they have crossed a certain Rubicon. So we have to see whether this will lead to greater opposition awareness about the unity that is essential to successfully give the BJP a challenge. But
Yeah.
I think Nitish Kumar, however late it may seem to somebody, has made a beginning.
There are former congressmen like Sanjay Jha who went on Twitter today and said that Nitish Kumar is much more suited than Mamta Banerjee to galvanize the non-BJP forces. This is a bit of a mischievous question for me to ask you because you've known them both well. You've worked with both of their parties. But if you had to take a personal opinion on that comment, what would you say?
No, I don't think that it's an appropriate question right now. What is appropriate is the realization in the opposition that divided we hang and united we may be able to prevail. Now, the question of leadership, the question of a pan India organizational framework, the question of a all India coordination on the basis of a common minimum program, the formation of a front, the agreement wherever possible of putting one candidate representing the entire opposition. Now, all of these are lessons to be learned from from by the opposition. This kind of unity that can give a run for its money to the BJP requires much more than what has just happened in Bihar.
But is this going to be Nitish Kumar's government or is it going to be Tejasvi Yadav's? How does the leader, survivor though he is, with 43 seats, assert himself as the leader of a coalition where the other partner has 79?
I think because we are approaching 2024. Now, if this experiment fails again, it's advantage BJP. So I think both Tejaswi and Nitish Kumar realized that in the final lead up to 2024, if they are not able to make a presentable success of their coming together, it will certainly be uh, against their interests.
Is it your sense that this is going to be a rotating chief ministership, as is being suggested? And is that viable? Does that convey confidence when you talk about a united opposition? Or
I
does it convey the picture
frankly,
of a squabbling for power for the seat opposition?
it's difficult to predict these things, and frankly, I am no longer in the JDU. But I don't think there is a talk of a rotating chief minister because this is a Gathbandhan not only between RJD and JDU, but seven parties, including the Congress, which has openly said that they have faith in Nitish Kumar as chief minister. So to rock the boat, Tejasvi is young. He will get his opportunity with greater experience and maturity. Uh, but right now, the biggest challenge is to put up a strong challenge to the BJP.
Finally, I must ask you to talk about somebody you know almost as well as you know Nitish Kumar, and that is Prashant Kishore. You have spoken about seven parties coming together at this moment to support Nitish Kumar. Mr. Kishore was one of those who joined Nitish Kumar's party, and then, as I mentioned earlier in this conversation, wanted him to part ways with the BJP. That didn't happen, and he took off on his own Bihar yatra. Do you, and then he almost joined the Congress, and that didn't happen, and all of that is history. Do you believe that this will be a moment for Nitish Kumar and Prashant Kishore to reunite?
I think we should wait and watch. It's too early to say what will happen, but I think we can discuss this in a little while from now.
Would you want them to reunite?
Well, I mean, they have worked together in the past. I recall once in an interview, Prashant Kishore was asked which is the leader he would work with, and he had said Nitish Kumar. There is a mutual respect and even affection between them. Both hail from Bihar. So we will see how it pans out. Uh, but it's very early to immediately say that this will happen or not happen.
And before we let you go, the impact on national opposition politics is what?
I think the impact on national politics is very clearly that you have one important focal point to rally the opposition parties emerging out of Bihar. The second takeaway for the opposition is that when united, they can prevent the BJP juggernaut from running over them. These are important lessons. And I think it's especially important in the Hindi heartland, where the BJP almost has a free run. So I think Bihar is a beginning. And let's see as a result of that what else happens. But certainly, I think this will impact both national politics and the opposition response to the BJP.
And I'm sure you would agree when I say that it isn't just about energizing the opposition. Mr. Kumar has lived in the shadows in the last couple of years. One has not heard or seen him in a way that one used to. So it is also perhaps about self re-energization, which is almost as critical. But the Chinese had a saying, we live in interesting times. You know that one as a diplomat, and certainly Bihar has given us at least something new to talk about in the national political context, where the opposition, desperate for a little glimmer of good news, has finally got that from the state of Bihar. Pavan Verma, pleasure as always. Take care and have a great evening. Thank you. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.